our session starts with Professor Steingrímur Jónsson. Steingrímur is a physical oceanographer by training and works at the University of Akureyri and the Icelandic Marine Research Institute. His research interests are physical oceanography and ocean circulation in the North Atlantic and its effects on biological resources. He's going to talk about climate variability, climate change, and the future of fisheries in the Arctic and subarctic marine ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you, Niels, and nice to see you all here. Now I have to open up my PowerPoint. So I have a very long and sophisticated title, of course, since I'm very old in this business. But there have been some speculations about the future of fisheries in the Arctic and the subarctic. Is it okay? Just put some more volume. Put some more volume. Okay, so it's good for Arctic people working in the Arctic to realize the scale of things, and I have put here the Arctic Circle, and the area within the Arctic Circle is only about 4% of the total area of the world, so it's very small really, but it does have substantial effects on the rest of the world. And as you can see, most of this area is covered by ocean, so the Arctic is very highly a marine system. It's good to keep that in mind. We had a large report published in 2005, the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment, and I think this is still the most comprehensive review of the Arctic, and maybe it's a good idea, since it is getting quite old, to try or start to prepare a new one. What does this report say about fisheries and climate change? So one of its conclusions is that the total effect of a moderate warming, 1 to 3 degrees, of the climate on fish stocks is likely to be of less importance than the effects of fisheries policies and their enforcement. That's the conclusion of the report, and I'm not going to say whether that is correct, but I know that fisheries policies do have large effect on fish stocks. And they also conclude that it is unlikely that the impact of the climate change projected for the 21st century on Arctic fisheries will have significant long-term economic or social impacts on a national level. So that's what they say, the experts in 2005, and we have seen some effects of climate change on fisheries, especially the mackerel lecture by Sigmar before, which maybe you look at it as a contradictory to this, but it doesn't maybe have to be. So if we look at the fishing vessel activity in the Arctic, and actually what we call the subarctic also, then you can see from this figure that the most of the fishing activity is concentrated in this area here, from Iceland up towards the Barents Sea, and there is also some fishery of West Greenland, and of course I will not talk about the Bering Sea, but they have a large fishery there. So the fishery is concentrated in this area, and this is the area we usually call the subarctic seas. And there is very limited fishery in the Arctic Ocean and also here in the Canadian Arctic archipelago. So, and most of the fishing takes place in the subarctic seas. So why is that? And then we should look at the temperature and salinity or conditions in the oceans, and then we see that this area where you had the large fisheries, it is covered with relatively saline and warm water, whereas the areas where we had very small fisheries are covered by cold water with low salinity. And maybe it's more the low salinity rather than the low temperature that prevents the fisheries. And in this area we have three water masses, basic water masses. We have the polar water, which is very cold. That's what is coming out of the Arctic Ocean. And we have Arctic waters, which is in between the polar water and the Atlantic water. And it's actually a mixture of these two water masses, and then a subsequent cooling down to very cold conditions. Now, what do we have for the biological production in this area? And we can see this very clearly here this is the primary production through the water column for the growing period from March to October. And we can see that within the warm and saline water we have very high productivity. That's of course the basic for every fishery is the plant production. It is just like on land, you cannot have a cow without a grass. But if we go over on the Greenland side, we see very low productivity. And even if this area is seasonally ice-free, there is very low productivity. And one of the basic reasons for that is that it is very stratified. We have this low salinity water that is very light and it floats on top of the ocean. And the nutrients in the ocean, they always or usually come from below. And when you have such strong stratification, you cannot get the nutrients into the surface layer where they can be used for photosynthesis. And here you can see that this follows exactly the path of the Atlantic water. If we look again here, you can see how the Atlantic water spreads to north of Iceland, and that's exactly where we have the high production of plants in the ocean. And this is another example of that. We have high salinity water with the white columns and low salinity water, the black ones. And you can see this is the productivity, and you can see that the productivity is much less when we have low salinity water. So one object that is very important in the ocean is fronts, and fronts are boundaries between water masses. And around Iceland and in this subarctic and Arctic Ocean there are many fronts, and they are often bounded by topography, and they are therefore unlikely to move long distances except if something very drastic happens. For example, during ice ages they can move. So, yeah, I think we have. So, most commercial fish stocks, they are mainly found in a single water mass, and most of them are very unlikely to cross fronts in the oceans. So the fronts acts like a barrier to fish migration. And you can see fronts here. There is one front between the polar water and the Arctic water. That's called the polar front. And then there is an Arctic front between the Arctic water and the Atlantic water. And you can see there's sharp change in temperature along these fronts. They are not as sharp or not as easily seen in the salinity figure, but salinity is most important for the polar front, where you have very low salinity water coming out of the Arctic Ocean. And here you can see the very sharp front in Denmark Strait between the Atlantic water coming into the North Icelandic waters, and where the temperature changes by maybe 5 degrees in several hundred meters. So this shows the catch rates for all species within these areas, and you can see there is virtually nothing in the Arctic Ocean, but there is a lot around Norway and Iceland. Now, what has changed in recent years is that we have had warming in the North Atlantic, or what we call the subpolar gyre, which is this area here that is in red here. I'm not going to tell you in detail what this figure is, but red means that it has been warming. And here you can see the warming of Iceland since 1995 or so. And what happened in 95 was that this is the subpolar gyre, the circulation in this area. And then on this area we have what we call the subtropical gyre. And before 1995 it was like this, the subpolar gyre was very strong, and small amount of Atlantic water escaped, or small water from this warm saline area to the south, slipped into our area. But after 1995 this circulation diminished, and the other ones, and it then allowed more warm and saline water to come to our area. And this has shown us changes in many fish stocks, amongst others this one, which is the monkfish. And here you can see how it is distributed. It was only in the south for many, many years, and until 1996, then you can see that it is crawling up along the west coast. And in 2003, which was extremely warm in Iceland, it has reached to the northern part of Iceland, and it has even gone further since that. But it always stays. It always stays in the same water mass, the Atlantic water. It's not going over to Greenland because it's still freezing there, and there's no food there. So it's crawling along this direction where you have the warm water and saline water. Now the same with mackerel. This is the distribution in 2012. You can see it's also going this way, along with the Atlantic water. It's not going into the polar water. So, in conclusion, then what we will see in the near future is that we will see expansion of fish stocks within a water mass, and to a much lesser extent migration of fish stocks between water masses. And we have to monitor the changes occurring as an effect of climate change, and research is needed, so how to understand how the changes affect the ecosystems. The Arctic is also an area that's difficult to access, and therefore we have limited information on it. But this has improved very much since the International Polar Year in 2007 and 2008. And it has really put the focus of the research community on the Arctic Ocean. And I just remind you of the conclusions from the Asia report, that it is the fisheries policy and their enforcements that are very important when it comes to the distribution of fish. And then I have this figure from Greenland. Okay, so thank you very much.
Bara sama háttin á hana, tökum við eftir. Thank you very much, Steingrímur, for this presentation. We'll have time, hopefully, for questions and queries after Páll Daviðsson's. Páll Daviðsson, he's an international lawyer with extensive experience from United Nations, the OSCE, which is an acronym I should know, and the Council of Europe, promoting human rights, the rule of law, and international security. And he is the founding director of Vox Naturae, and he will be speaking on a project that he is partnering with the World Bank, an initiative called the Ice Circle. Thank you. Páll.
Push. Oh. Good afternoon, and thanks to the participants for allowing me to be here. I'm the oddball in the group, I presume. I'm not a scientist, as Niels very much explained. But I'm someone who is concerned about the changes taking place, because through my work, which has been in some of the most greatest conflict zones in the world, I've seen how changes in the environment, how changes to natural resources have a direct impact on the societies that depend on these environments and on conflict, right? So when I started looking at what is happening in the world, I became very concerned about a crucial resource, which is ice. And I developed and established Vox Naturae, the voice of nature, as a platform, in a way, for channeling and generating action on ice-related issues. So opposed to maybe most of you who are researching the impact, I'm trying to call for action. My goal is not to generate information, but to get people to react to things. Now, I just actually came from Tajikistan. I was there attending a high-level conference on water, which was in Tajikistan. I came last night. So if I fall asleep during the talk, it's because I'm too tired or I find myself very boring. Both options are open. Now, what you're basically talking about here, I find very interesting. You're looking at sharing experiences and exploring new methods, assessing socio-economic impacts on northern territories. What I have for you is one proposition, one suggestion, and one kind of key point. And the key point is basically that, yes, crucial aspect of what you're all looking at is snow and ice retreating, that having severe impact on northern territories. Now, it so happens that snow and ice exist on all territories. At this high-level conference I attended and spoke at in Dushanbe, 7 heads of states, ambassadors from all United Nations member states. I organized an event on the decline of ice and snow and how we can respond to it and how that will affect water security around the world. And what was so striking is that many of the concerns that you have been raising here were being raised there. But they were being raised by who? The ambassador of Afghanistan. Very concerned. Snow being very important source of water for the people of Afghanistan. Right? You had the ambassador of Tanzania being very concerned about the snows of Kilimanjaro. You had the ambassadors of Fiji, St. Kitts, and Cape Verde saying like, well, yes, we have no glaciers, but we decided that out of all the events taking place at this forum, we want to sit here and talk about glaciers because we are very concerned. Our population is being threatened by the rise of sea levels. Something needs to happen. You had the ambassador of Tajikistan saying, we are rapidly losing our glaciers. Many small glaciers will disappear in the next 30 or 40 years, having their direct impact on water security. So it's different to the scenario Berger described here in Iceland, where water security or water supply will maybe remain the same. Kazakhstan, very, very striking situation where they say that because of snow and ice retreating, maybe in only 30 years, we're going to look at 20 to 40% reduction in water supply. When you go to the Himalayan and Andes region, striking consequences. Because anyway, ice does is that it stores water. It stores water until it becomes warmer, until we have the agricultural season, and then this water is gradually released to the population downstream. Right? Now, all these kind of things are also happening in the Arctic. Right? There are similarities between all these dots around the globe affecting populations that are dependent on snow and ice. So my proposition is this. Isn't there an opportunity and isn't there a need to connect these communities? And this in a way ties to what Professor Finger said about the need to mobilize people. If we mobilize only Arctic voices, whom are we going to have? We're going to have pretty isolated and maybe badly organized people. But when we connect that with, which is actually a quarter of humanity who are dependent on snow and ice for various kind of ecosystem services, you've got a very strong advocacy role. Right? Can these communities not learn from each other how to adapt to these changes, share technologies, push for changes? Right? My proposition is basically yes, that needs to happen, but there is a challenge. The challenge is that there's a very striking gap, and it's interesting to explore that gap when you compare water in its solid form and water in its liquid form. When it comes to water in its liquid form, you've got hundreds of conferences all around the globe, 250 per year. And who is attending? Let's talk just about the World Water Week, which is happening in just a few weeks in Stockholm, or the one I attended. World Water Week, whom do you have? Yeah, you've got scientists like yourselves, but hey, you also have CEOs from Coca-Cola and Pepsi. You've got national leaders coming together. And these people are sitting down saying, water is an important resource. The humanity is facing major issues of water scarcity. We need to do something. And information flows. When it comes to ice, you've got scientists talking to scientists. And most of them being fed of it because they feel the need to channel their information and their knowledge to people who are the decision makers. When it comes to NGOs, you've got thousands around the world advocating, mobilizing, bringing about policy changes when it comes to water. Right? Water and gender, water and children, water and sanitation. When it comes to ice, you've got one NGO in the world, our NGO. Governance and regulation, knowledge. There are substantial gaps. There are substantial gaps in ensuring collaboration on ice-related issues. So, this is our proposition. Came from a small NGO in Iceland. We have now rallied the World Bank, the Global Water Partnership, which is the largest international organization on the planet, working in 160 countries. The International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, which is basically the leading think tank on the Himalayan region. The United Nations University on Water, Environment and Health, and our organization saying something needs to happen. We need institutional arrangements to bridge this gap. So our proposition is essentially creating this, what we call the iCircle. And it will be a governmentally mandated platform, it will be a multi-donor trust fund, and an international voice encouraging and supporting a multidisciplinary and international response to the state and impact of changing snow and ice regimes. So it will look at the Arctic, it will look at the Himalaya, it will look at around the globe where these issues are of concern. So what I want to tell you about are its roles. I'm interested in getting your feedback, actually. We see a very crucial role for Forum. We see a very crucial importance in then bringing about collaboration. Collaboration at the level of communities, where Arctic communities could connect with communities in the Himalaya region to share experiences. We see it as a crucial platform where scientists can meet with policymakers. Right? So that those who generate the information can meet with those who are the end users of information to bring about some kind of change. This access exists in terms of water. It doesn't really exist when it comes to ice. We also see a need for an international voice. Our organization, Vox Naturae, organized on the 20th of February a World Bank event basically talking about the challenge of declining snow and ice. On the 31st of May, we organized the first United Nations event on the challenges humanity faces because of these changes, right? And now we organized a major event at this high-level conference. All these things are basically being funded out of my pocket money. We had like 10 ambassadors attending the event we organized in Dushanbe. We had the top-level United Nations officials coming forth and saying there is a very serious challenge happening, and it's basically a guy in Iceland who's funding this. It doesn't make any sense. You need a strong entity, you need a strong international voice talking about these issues at a policy level. And thirdly, you need a fund. Our idea is that this fund, which will be governed by the World Bank, will focus on 5 themes. August, you just missed a fantastic beginning. Huh? It will focus on public awareness, because without awareness, nothing happens. There will also be a challenge fund for adaptation. These changes are happening, communities need to adapt. How can we build the capacity of communities to adapt? There are a number of strategies that exist. The Swiss have tried to cover up the glaciers. In the Himalayan region, people are trying to create artificial glaciers. There are a number of things that you can do. We're looking to funding and supporting communities in surviving in a world with less ice. There will also be a mitigation fund, right? How can we reduce the impact? We're seeking to promote knowledge partnerships, and this is actually quite relevant to you. We see a crucial importance of connecting knowledge institutions such as universities in sharing experiences, no longer limited just to the north, but connecting the north with other regions. We see also a crucial importance in connecting PhD students. There's a particular initiative that has been proposed by the UNESCO Center on Water Law, Policy and Science. And this initiative basically goes to say it will be the next generation that will face a world without ice. The threats we are looking at are totally interdisciplinary. So what we need to create is an initiative, a platform, where PhD students around the globe studying maritime or glaciology or sociology, what have you, but things that relate to ice and snow, are connected to share experiences, to create a network of future leaders. And thirdly, data collection and monitoring. This is our proposal. Very excitingly, one of the outcomes of the high-level conference will be a call to us, the organizers, to launch this platform early next year. So it's basically a call to the World Bank and the other partners to launch this. I have a certain concern, and I don't know if you can help. My concern is that I got a number of governments coming directly to me and saying, I want to help. Right? We want to push this. The president of Kazakhstan has called for an international fund on glaciers. The president of Tajikistan has done the same. My view is that the location of such a fund should be in Northern Territories for 2 very, very important reasons. One thing is that if this becomes an entity in Tajikistan, it will only focus on glaciers. I think the poles should be included. And in a way, for instance, Iceland is a very interesting bridge between the 2 worlds of the Arctic and all the snow and ice dependent communities. And second thing is politics. Ice and snow exist on mountains, and mountains are on borders, and borders are very frequently being contested. The water supplied by glaciers are a crucial source of water for a large part of humanity. And this precious resource is frequently being disputed, much less here in Northern Territories. So my point is that if we manage to establish this here in the north, if we manage to get governments here interested, we may have this fund, we may have this forum here, which would be very exciting for you, the researchers. So on the 9th and 10th of September, we're going to have the World Bank, all the partners coming here to Iceland. We'll be speaking to the government, and we are basically laying the plans for the funding of the Ice Circle. If governments here do not pick up on the ball and say, yes, we want this here, this is going to end up somewhere else. with the consequence of being much less effective, is my concern. So if you have contacts, if you have ideas, if you can support us, please do. How much do I have in terms of time? Am I done?
5 minutes.
Yeah. Any comments, any questions? What do you think? What do you think of the opportunity of having a specific platform where there be regular conferences and meetings where policymakers and scientists will meet? August. Sorry, you. At first, not like. Do you want to take over do you want to moderate, or am I just?
Well, I guess I should. Yes.
Well, you can say something. Totally happy with that also, right?
Thank you, Páll. So you basically want to use the rest of your time to engage the floor?
Yeah, definitely. I'm very keen on hearing what you think. It's a new idea. Yeah. Yeah, right.
I think the idea of Nicholas from the University of Lapland.
Hi, Nicholas.
And NRF Young Researcher. I think the idea is good, but
there are quite a few of these platforms on the rise right now, and like the Arctic Circle obviously is one of them. Then there's the EU Arctic Foundation, and my concern would be that it shouldn't be too many in order to kind of maintain a certain quality and a certain significance. Or
my point is exactly get out of this Arctic parameters. We need to think global.
Sorry?
The issues we're looking at are all manifestation of a global problem, right? And people around the globe are facing these consequences. This is not just an Arctic issue, it's a global issue. Arctic Circle is just focused on the Arctic. The Ice Circle will look at the issues globally. This is a key point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, sorry.
One comment. It's not exactly true that the Arctic Circle is going to concentrate the Arctic only. No, it's global forum. And behind there is that the 6th NRF Open Assembly, it has been mentioned here yesterday, the theme was our ice-dependent world. It was global. And we had 15 scientists from the Himalayan region, India, Bhutan, Nepal, China. So by that way, it has been started already. Of course, we need more actors, but first of all, we need more cooperation and synergy. That would be something if you can think about how to build synergy here. Thank you.
Very easy to answer that. Let me emphasize one thing. This initiative is not meant to suppress or overtake any of the other initiatives. It is simply meant to leverage ICE's non-related issues into international dialogue on human rights, water, development, what have you. Yes, of course, there have been a number of scientists that have come from all around the world to sit at the Arctic Circle, but we are talking about governments. And you see even the difficulties of getting an observer status at the Arctic Circle. We're talking about governments sitting at the same table with no kind of priority status being given to the aid in the Arctic. Right? This is why we think it's very important to have a new forum to focus on these issues.
Embla, and then I think Steingrímur, you can join us perhaps for the final minutes of the session.
Hello, Páll. My name is Embla again. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering, because these are sort of valid comments about the sort of many different new initiatives starting, and I think perhaps it's an unavoidable process. You know, when something catches people's attention, you know, people are moved to do something about it. So if that happens in many places, then fine. I'm just thinking because, I mean, as Lasse pointed out, there was an emphasis on ice in Hveragerði 3 years ago, but then Arctic Circle, although it sort of has a global perspective, it doesn't really focus solely on ice. I've talked to you about this project before, and my understanding then from you was that one of your objectives was to widely reach the public. And you mentioned a certain event that had to do with a very sort of artistic depiction of a glacier here in Iceland. And I wonder, is that still on the schedule? And could you, I mean, do you have something that you could show the audience?
Do I have 2 minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
There's a whole plan we have. Very, very quickly. One of the things we're advocating is an international year of snow and ice. And that will be considered by the United Nations, 28 agencies, in just a few days in Stockholm. So that's an idea that's on the table, and we may even get away with it. The other part, which you're mentioning, Embla, is a particular public awareness campaign which we call Celebrating Glaciers. And it's based on the premise that in order to move people, you need to generate events, because events are really what get people going. I had a long conversation with David Hicks, for instance. I mean, all the information is out there, but in order to get people's attention, you need to do something. Think about 9/11. Think about Hurricane Sandy. When these things happen, people start to ask themselves, what is happening? What can I do? Very quickly, there was research on climate change and attitude change, which in fact had this very finding, saying that what actually affects people's attitudes are events, because they show people black and white through force of circumstance rather than force of reason how the world is, and they get people talking. So we want to start all kinds of positive events that get people talking. For instance, we want to take a glacier and place it in New York, right? Simple headline around the world, glacier melting in New York. We want to illuminate a glacier in Iceland. We want to generate events that are visual, that are exciting, that get people's imaginations going. And very importantly, we want to use the ripple generated by these kind of events to educate people. So we have partnered with these entities who have a huge social outreach to reach to classrooms and the public with information on snow and ice and why it's important for humanity. So if this works, you're going to have your hands busy for the next few years.
I also want to bring to your attention that we did have another speaker in this second half of the session, Steingrímur, who basically gave us the big picture of the most important ecosystem in the world. I think Steingrímur has taught me that several times. But you had a question?
Thank you very much. Thank you also for this very interesting presentation on fisheries. And I was wondering about the impact of species coming from southern waters towards the northern upper front of Atlantic waters, right? What's going to be the impact of this different species distribution on the habitat of these areas, which become more comfortable for them, for the southern species. I mean, the northern species more will they be displaced or affected?
Yes, what happens to the species in the north? I think they will, all species have their different comfort zones. But if you want to change from one water mass to another, it's a very big step. So I think that when the southern species move northwards or towards, or in the climate gradient, then they will squeeze the other species that are there before. For example, this mackerel, it has been suggested that it is eating so and so much, and then perhaps taking food from other species, or even eating other species. Like, for example, there has been discussion about it, the mackerel eating a lot of sandsíli. I don't know what that is in English. Sandeel. It is a small fish, and maybe that's one of the reasons why there is so little sand eel
in Icelandic waters, that the mackerel is preying on it. So I think the more northern species, they will get squeezed in between, so they will probably lose some of their habitats and maybe reduce in quantity. I think that is what will happen. But we have not seen very clear examples of this here.
Is management approach something which is a kind of theoretical figure that sounds good, but it's difficult to apply for fisheries? Or do you have a feeling that more can be said on that for the next impact assessment?
I think most fisheries managers, they want to have ecosystem-based management, but it's not so easy. And I don't think we have some examples of trying to not to base our management of the fish stocks just on a single stock, but on the combination or interactions with other stocks. But it's not at a very sophisticated level, because we just don't have the data and the knowledge to do it in a good manner. So ecosystem-based management is still, it has to improve. But I think it has some years at least before it becomes effective.
Sigmar?
Yeah, Sigmar Arnarsson from the University of Tromsø, and NRF young researcher. Just one comment about water supply in Iceland. I think that came as a great concern to people living in Akureyri. I think last summer we couldn't wash our cars because the water level was so low in the reservoir, so it was a huge impact on the town of Akureyri at least. But I want to have a question to Steingrímur is the change that you're observing. Are you observing any other indicators that it's increasing? Is it decreasing, or any idea if it's going to be permanent? It's going back. So any projections or anything made to see what the future might be?
It's always difficult to say anything about the future, but of course, this warming that we have observed here has occurred quite quickly, and probably too quickly to be just what we usually mean with climate change by anthropogenic climate change. So there is a good possibility that it will reverse and go back again. And we have actually seen in the North Atlantic that salinity has been lowering during the last year. So that might be the beginning of something, and this might be a signal from the Arctic Ocean. We have had fresh water accumulating in the Canadian part of the Arctic Ocean, and it has been accumulating for more than a decade. And some of this may be released into the North Atlantic, and that would lead to a lowering of the salinity and perhaps a strengthening of the subpolar gyre again, and then a reduction in the flow of warm and saline waters. So, but I don't think anyone can predict when or how it is going to happen.
We have time for one more question, and then perhaps one from me as well. But
yes, my name is Daviðsson from the university here in Akureyri. I'm almost next door to Steingrímur, but my question was similar to the same. We have a lot of regular fluctuations, AMO and these kind of, and also in the northern subpolar gyre, which is there is some kind of index for the gyre which fluctuates. But it isn't. I mean, we have some articles from the 1920s that there were warm water species here as well. So what, in your opinion, would weight more the global warming or just some very, very regular fluctuations that are going on, you know? And regarding the barriers, I mean, there are very dramatic examples of species who can jump this barrier, the fronts. That's primarily the cod. You have in Greenland, like on-off, you have either a lot of cod or almost no cod. So it seems to be able to get over this barrier and gain new territories if the temperature goes above some kind of a threshold. But anyway, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Whether it is climate change or just natural fluctuations, you know, I don't think there is any doubt that anthropogenic climate change is going on, but it is then, of course, superimposed on all the natural fluctuations. And I think perhaps most of the warming that we have seen here, at least around Iceland, is probably due to natural variations, but then the climate change is superimposed on that, so we might be getting warmer than we have ever been before. I don't think we are there yet, but we might very well be in 10 years or so. And regarding the other questions about species being able to cross, the cod does not cross the front when it goes to Greenland. It is still living in Atlantic water, because most of the Atlantic water that comes into Icelandic waters, it actually goes over to Greenland and even to West Greenland, and the cod there is living in that water. So even if it is at Greenland, it is still in Atlantic water. It does not enter the polar water. But it is true that we had a huge cod fishery in Greenland in the 1950s, 300,000–400,000 tons. But now there is almost nothing. It's just a bycatch. There's no catch allowed of cod in Greenland. So, but it has been increasing slightly during the recent years, but not to the extent that it was before. But that's maybe because the Icelandic cod stock has been very low, and it was actually the Icelandic cod stock that spawning around Iceland, and then the larvae drifted to Greenland, and they could survive there and build up a stock there. So that is something that has not happened recently during this recent warming. So there are a lot of issues to think about here.
Steingrímur, thank you. And this session is coming to a close. It's been extremely interesting, very different presentations. The long-term, careful scientific research of Steingrímur and the engaging, pressing issues that Páll has been presenting for us. And Steingrímur is calling for more research, as scientists always do. They need more research, and Páll has shown that we need more action. We need more action internationally. I just have a short question to Páll. I couldn't help noticing the similarity between your project, the iCircle, and I guess what some would call the Icelandic President's project. Although he's not the only one behind it, the Arctic Circle. Is there any kind of connection or dialogue between the two?
Very good. Actually, this is the thing I was discussing with David, and I agree with both of your points. We don't want to have proliferation of initiatives, no synergies between them, and everything becomes very, very confused. I mean, again, the President initiative is very much on the Arctic, but for the founding meeting, they will have one initiative on the Himalayan region. We are very keen in having a dialogue between those two, and we in fact propose that a representative from the World Bank be present at the Arctic Circle meeting, so we can indeed explore what kind of synergies are between. I mean, these two are different forums. Theirs is very much about like sharing ideas. Ours is about funding, generating policies, generating action, right? But still there are certainly synergies and they need to be explored. I totally agree with that.
Very good. So, thank you all for participating. I believe we have another session starting, the final session, and you are dismissed.
We will start the final session after 5 minutes. And then there will be only one session.